The Emancipation Proclamation was issued during the middle of the Civil War in 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln. At first, it only freed the slaves in the Confederacy, but in 1865, all slaves in America were finally free. This was the day that slaves throughout America dreamed of. After long years of torture and hard work, slaves were overjoyed to be free. One slave named Tom Robinson couldn't believe he was free. He kept having his owner read the paper that allowed him to leave, still not believing his owner's words. After some convincing and seeing the papers for himself, Tom set off joyfully into a world of freedom. Unfortunately, freedom came with a price. The majority of freed slaves were given no land and no livestock. Former slave Mitty Freeman says, "It seems like it took a long time for freedom to come. Everything just kept on like it was. We heard that lots of slaves was getting land and some mules to set up for theirselves. I never knowed any what got land or mules nor nothing." Some freed slaves sustained themselves and their families by hunting or doing small, low-wage jobs. A few of them were lucky enough to receive a small portion of land to farm on, though they were only given places with poor soil. But after a while, many freed slaves were forced to return to their owners to ask for a job. Plantation owners took advantage of this and exploited the former slaves. They would lease the slaves a small piece of land to farm on in return for half of their profits. The freed slaves would sometimes be given a small amount of livestock, but were required to pay their own rent, their own farming equipment, and animal feed. In the end, slaves received close to nothing and suffered huge debts that they were unable to pay off. This system was called sharecropping. Many described sharecropping as a new form of slavery. Despite having to support themselves and their families, freed slaves also had to deal with segregation and discrimination. Segregation was a set of laws that limited black activities. Blacks weren't allowed to attend white schools or go to white churches. Blacks were also denied civil rights and considered unequal. Many whites looked down on blacks. Free whites were afraid that freed slaves would take away their jobs or lower their job salaries. Some whites created riots and participated in violent protests. A few whites joined the Ku Klux Klan, a group that terrorized former slaves and abolitionists. Members of the Ku Klux Klan would stop former slaves from voting. Also, slave traders and owners lost a lot of money and weren't too happy about it. Some slave owners even tried moving with their slaves to Texas in order to avoid the Union from freeing their slaves. Most white Northerners supported the Emancipation Proclamation, while most white Southerners did not. This was because the plantations in the South greatly depended on slaves for producing cash crops. Also, most abolitionists were from the North. Being free was almost and sometimes even as bad as being a slave. The Emancipation Proclamation may have freed the slaves, but it did not free their burdens or give them economic independence. To this day, there are still slaves all over the world, including America. The kind of slavery today is similar to sharecropping. Families living in poverty-stricken places are forced to borrow money from factory owners in exchange for their child to be sent to work in order to pay off their debts. Like sharecropping, these debts are usually impossible to pay off, and many children spend their whole lives working for the money lender. Even after the Emancipation Proclamation and other similar laws around the world, we have not been able to truly put an end to slavery.